Jonny Lazarus is one half of Morning Cup of Hockey, covers the Rangers for dailyfaceoff.com. He comes to us from the streets of New York where spring is in the air, but the playoffs are not, Johnny. And before we talk about how this season went down for the Rangers, let me start with Calvin De Haan. He made some really interesting comments going out to the ice the other day for the Rangers and then replied to one of your tweets with sort of a follow-up explanation. I'll spare everyone reading through it all, but what did you make of De Haan's comments?
I think it's one of those things where, he said something going onto the ice and didn't think that it would be on the record or online, a minute later. So I think that's why Calvin responded to me, just because I think he didn't want to give it 3 days of speculation or let fans run away with a narrative that, they might do online, which, let's be honest, most fan bases do that sometimes when they see a quote and there isn't clarification on it. So, Calvin's definitely active on Twitter, which is honestly kind of awesome as a fan when you see a player that is willing to go out and speak for themselves. I think he told Molly and Peter that the team had told him he can speak on Friday at exit day or whenever exit day might be. And sorry, I'm trying to get centered in the camera here. But for him to kind of address it on his own and the way he went about it, I think everything he said was pretty spot on. I think what he said also, the organization can't be angry at him for, and I think fans can understand. So, I don't think he wanted it on social media, but the circumstances were what they were, and I think he handled it in a really good way. So, I'm happy he did that. It was a very surprising notification to get, but it made for a good story, I guess, yesterday.
Okay, so let me just try and boil this down, Johnny, because my head's kind of exploding watching all this go back and forth. So player gets acquired and is upset that he hasn't played, and then is now alleging or saying that he's been mistreated or treated poorly. Like last time I checked, the Rangers pretty much treat all of their players like gold, and it's, in terms of organization to organization, they treat their players as well or better than anyone. Is he actually saying that he's been mistreated, or he's just a guy that's unhappy because he's not playing?
Well, listen, I think from what he said, he's unhappy he's not playing, and I think the treatment comes from ice time when the 3 games he played in were probably the 3 best games the Rangers had played, since the deadline. I think they had back-to-back shutouts. I think they only let him 1 goal in the 3 games he was actually in the lineup for. And when you look at it, the players that have spoken out, like Kako, VC, Jones, they have every right to be upset that they're not playing because the team isn't winning hockey games. If the team is winning, they probably keep their mouths shut. But
Okay, but they're far
Calvin
from
De
the
Haan.
first players. They're far from the first players in the NHL to not play and be unhappy. So,
Of
I
course,
guess
of course.
they're two separate things. Is my point. Don't say mistreated and then just say because I'm not playing. We all get it. If you're not playing, you're unhappy. I also get the other part of it, which is why acquire me if you're not going to play me? That's another fair question to ask. But I guess they're two separate things. Not playing
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean mistreated.
Well, maybe he feels like he should be playing based on what the results have been, and maybe that's the mistreatment. I think that could make sense. Like if the Rangers are in the playoffs and they're winning games, it's not looked at as mistreatment. It's the right lineup decisions, right? Like if he comes in and he plays well and helps them win hockey games, and they're not going to play him after that, that seems a little bit like mistreatment to me. I mean, listen, I'm just going to take the player side here, because I've been in those situations where I've felt the same. Granted, it's not the NHL level, but when you think you can help your team win and you've shown that you can help your team win, maybe it's not the sexiest way of doing so, but the analytics actually speak for themselves. If you look at the 3 games he played, the eye test matches what the analytics say. He's a defensive defenseman. The Rangers didn't get scored on, and he has every right to feel that he could have helped this team win hockey games. So I don't blame him for feeling the way he does. And listen, I think there's also times where a guy doesn't play, and maybe a guy is even hurt, and the team kind of just forgets about him. I'm not saying this happened to Calvin, but healthy scratches don't always get treated like they're a part of the team. And it's been 18 games in a row. So he probably feels like he's not a part of it right now. And that sucks. Like I've been in that position too. And, your team could win a game, your team could lose a game. You just walk into the locker room for 2 minutes after when you're in your suit and you don't even feel like you're in the group. So it's tough. It sucks that he feels that way. And I'm sure he'll give more detail to it when exit day does happen. But for now, all we can really confirm is that he's pissed he's not playing.
Okay, so
Let's talk a
John,
little bit.
I was going to say,
Go
we're
ahead.
all expecting that there's going to be a coaching change here
Yeah.
after the season ends. Who would be at the top of your list to be the next coach of the New York Rangers?
Well, it's someone that hasn't won a Stanley Cup, that's for sure. Because I know the stat is only 3 coaches that have won a Stanley Cup somewhere else have won it again in like a second organization, right? That's the stat. Like only 3 head coaches of all time have won 2 cups in 2 different organizations. So just based on history, I'd want someone who hasn't won a cup elsewhere. Um, it's actually interesting though. Like I think there's a chance, like a Michael Pekka, who's been an assistant coach, could get a look. Someone within the organization, obviously, that the players seem to really like and has done a good job in his role. That's a name that stands out. Other names, listen, I don't want to sound like basic here, but depending on what they feel the team can do next year, like Joel Quenneville's name could probably be in the mix. I don't know if that's something that's totally off the table. Maybe they go the college route, even though I don't necessarily think they should, and give a guy like David Carl an interview. Colby said in our show this morning, just based on David Carl's tone, the last time they spoke at the Frozen Four, he thinks that the NHL isn't totally off the table for him. So maybe that's the direction they go in. Those are just 3 names off the top of my head that I can think of. But again, like I don't think they go with the, older, veteran, experienced coach like they did with Peter Laviolette this time around. I think they hired the guy based on a resume and based on a name versus based on what might have been the best fit. Even though last year, obviously they had a great year in the organization, so it's tough to say that they made the wrong choice last year. Do you have any names that you think, Frank, that you've heard?
Yeah, I would keep Rick Tocchet toward the top of the Rangers list. I think if he becomes a free agent, if the Canucks they don't get a deal done with him, that I think the Rangers would be really interested in a guy like Rick Tocchet.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious to see if Michael Pekka does get a chance, though. I'd be very interested to see if that happens. But Rick Tocchet, obviously, he seems like a guy that everyone loves playing for the most part. So I don't know much about him, to be honest, like other than the media stuff he's done. But we'll see. We'll see the direction the team goes into. I have to think that they're gonna try to put together a competitive roster for next year. I mean, this is a team that had Stanley Cup aspirations. They're not looking to tear anything down, so they do want to bring someone in that will help them win a Stanley Cup versus help them build over the 2-3 year window.
Well, that's where I kind of wanted to wrap up was how do you go about the balance of like changing up this group and improving the roster while also not totally ripping it down to the studs? Like, I mean, there's so many Rangers fans in our chat and it feels like every day they're going, trade Zibanejad, trade Kreider, Trocheck was a disappointment. And it's like, well, you can't just move all of those guys, can you?
I mean, listen, you can say what you want about Chris Drury, but he definitely gets stuff done when it comes to trades, right? Like, if he's shown anything that he's able to do over the past, 3-4 seasons, it's bring in names, that's for sure, right? Like and maybe it's not the best fit at the time, but he's able to do it. Like he brought in Kane, brought in Tarasenko, got rid of Trouba's contract, brings in JT Miller. Like he has the ability to do it. So I don't see why. That it can't happen, and I do think they will find a way to get rid of Mika Zibanejad and Chris Kreider. It's just a matter of will someone else be willing to take them. I think that's going to be the focus of the summer is to move on from those contracts, but you got to find a suitor. So that's the hardest part of it. But I do, from what I've gathered, I have to think that they're going to do everything they can to move on from those two.
Should be an interesting summer out in New York. Jonny, appreciate your time. Thanks for hopping on.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Seravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern, Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.